See it?
You're recording out there.
Les Amis de Vin. I brought it back. I'm bringing it back. It's a very important group in California, in America, actually.
Rolling.
So you ready? All right, here we go. Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today, beautiful Southern California, about 85 degrees. About to have a conversation with the winemaker and director of technology, I guess they call him, Matthew Maginot of Albert Bijot in Burgundy. Incredible conversation coming up. Wine Talks, of course, available on Pandora, iHeartRadio, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. And sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now featuring the Napa and Sweet series of wines. And got some great episodes coming up. We have Doug Filipponi, who used to drill water wells in Paso Robles and now has a winery called Ancient Peaks. And don't forget the great late Steven Spurrier, his podcast a few months ago. Check it out at winetalkspodcast.com. But not while we're here. We're here to have a great conversation with the technical director of Albert Bijot, one of the great Burgundy houses in France, Matthew Maginot. Welcome to the show.
Well, hello.
Bienvenue.
Merci. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. A lot to talk about. Burgundy is one of the most fascinating parts of the wine world, and we are excited to have you in here to talk about it. But I want to go back to the Bijot name, because Burgundy, for the listeners, Burgundy is, I think, particularly now in my career after 32 years, one of the most important parts of winemaking in the world, right? You have to agree with that, right?
Yeah. I have to. Yeah.
Of course. So,
Yeah.
And I read about the Bijot, B-I-C-H-O name, O-T, going back to like the 1200s.
Yeah. So it's a very long history with the Bijot in Bourgogne. As you've got sign of the family in many places. So of course in Montely, where everything started, but more older in places like Châteauneuf, and you can still go there, which is a city in the northern part of Beaune. It's less than 1 hour drive north of Beaune, and there is a very old castle, and in this city you've got a stone in a wall that shows the coat of arms of the Bijot family.
Really?
So if you look at our labels, you'll see the three trees with the deer, and that's a coat of arms you're going to find in this house in Châteauneuf. So very old link of the family in Burgundy, and they've been so now in the wine business for a generation. Alberic Bijot is currently managing and running the company, and is the sixth generation in charge of the company and of the family.
First of all, there's very few wine districts in the world that can talk about that kind of history, which is, we're going to touch on that in a second. But for the listeners, I want them to understand, Burgundy is what, the northeast of Paris, a little bit, couple hours?
Yeah.
How long did I get to?
It's southeast of Paris.
Southeast of Paris.
Southeast of Paris. It's it's beginning with Chablis. So
right.
Burgundy starts with Chablis. It's 1 hour and a half drive southeast of Paris, and then you drive another hour and a half, and you'll be in Beaune. So it's roughly the center of Burgundy is 3 hours from Paris.
And it's sort of a narrow north-south strip of land, starting with Chablis to the west a little bit, right? This is in my mind now, so correct me if I'm wrong. And then we're going to start with what we consider probably the premium part of Burgundy, which is the Côte de Nuit, which is the northern part, right?
Yeah.
That's
so
accurate.
Yeah. So of course the first part will be Chablis, and you head south, and the first part, you're correct, just south of Dijon will be Côte de Nuit. So Côte de Nuit is roughly between Dijon, just south of Dijon, to just north of Beaune. So this section covers many nice villages like Fissin, Gevrey, of course, with all the fantastic Grand Cru we have, Moret Saint-Denis, Nuit Saint-Georges, of course, Vaune Romanée, so all the big names, including the very big names that made the Burgundy very, very famous. You cannot, of course, you're obliged to mention Romanée Conti or places like that, that are in Côte de Nuit. And so
DRC, we call it here.
Yeah, DRC, that's right. So DRC.
So if we're in what's the main village of the Côte de Nuit? Saint-Georges?
You've got Nuit Saint-Georges, of course, is the main one. It will be the center point.
Right.
Of course, Gevrey is very well known. Gevrey Chambertin, as it's one of the largest areas, villages and it has beautiful Premier Cru as well as the 9 Grand Cru, so it's very, very well known. After that, you've got, of course, Moret Saint-Denis, which is not really known on itself, but that has fantastic cru.
Some beautiful wines
Claude de
there.
Tard, Claude de Lambray, that are
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. Chambol also, that produce beautiful wine, very refined. Vaune Romanée, well, it's a lot
Does
of...
Chambol have Grand Cru? Or just
yes.
Premier Cru?
Yeah, Grand Cru as
Wow,
well.
because
No,
I have some Premier Cru here, it's incredible.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to get into the. We can talk about that forever. So we're going to go to the Côte de Beaune. But the middle of the Côte d'Or is the Côte de Beaune. Beaune is the main village, which has the hospice and all the amazing tourist attractions for Burgundy in general.
Absolutely. So it's a quite small town. It's
It is
only
small.
25,000 inhabitants, but it's the center of Burgundy with everything here, thousands of restaurants, many things to see and visit. You've got music festivals, you've got arts, painting, and above all, you've got food everywhere. So
Yes.
food and very good food pairing. So that's really a place to go to and to be, and it's of course a place to visit.
One of my bucket lists, one of the things I want to do is the auction.
Yeah. So auction is
The hospice.
yeah, that's in November. So after the harvest, that's really a big party here. So of course you've got the auction. So the estate of the hospital will sell by auction all the wines they produce on the year by auction. So all the negotiation
Right.
from Beaune and the other area will buy and purchase the wines. And so that's money is going back to the hospital. So
Yes.
that's what is very interesting, is that hospital will be built with the generosity of the buyers. Of course, the prices are a bit higher than the
Of course.
traditional wine, but this is for the good cause, to help the hospital, to help the people here, and this makes this auction very, very famous. And
It just seems like a great event, and for the listeners, the hospice is a very famous hospital that is obviously not used now, but it was very important in its early days. I don't remember what century that was. Is it 14th, 15th century?
Yeah, 12, even 11th, 12th
Earlier than
century.
that? And maybe it ties into this book that we were just talking about, because the curative properties of wine, and I think that had a lot to do with the hospice. And then, so if we're in Beaune, basically the center of the Burgundy region, then we had the Chalonnais.
Yeah, so just south of Beaune, of course, you've got the Côte, what they call the Côte de Beaune, by opposition to Côte de Nuit, which is on the northern part of Beaune.
Oh, I see. Okay, so Beaune and Côte de Beaune.
Yeah, exactly. So the Beaune, Côte de Beaune, where you find also famous villages like Pomar, for example, Volnay, to mention the reds. And also we have to mention Meursault, fantastic Meursault de South, Puligny, Chassagne, which are the places where to me the best white wines of the world are made. So very impressive, with the richness and everything. And then yes, you head to southern, you head to Côte Chalonnaise, or all the vineyards that are on the western side of Chalon-sur-Saône, like Mercury, like Centenaire, that kind of other places.
So the reds from the Chalonnais, or the Côte de Chalonnaise, is the Centenaires, the Mercuries, those kinds of things, and then we're going to end up in the Mâconnais, which is primarily white.
Yeah, Mâconnais, essentially white, and very well known for it. There is a few reds, but it's mainly known for white wines. With Pouilly-Fuissé also, for example, that gives a brilliant village appellation, and more recently Premier Cru. So they've reached the Premier Cru level. So you find also a selection of Premier Cru in Pouilly-Fuissé.
So for the listeners, when we talk about Grand Cru, which is the highest level of, I don't know what the word is, the highest level of sophistication maybe, for the wines of the Burgundy region, then you have Premier Cru, and then we have Village, and then what's the next?
And then it's we call them regional appellation.
Original.
So for example, a Bourgogne Blanc or Bourgogne Rouge can be made in Chablis, around Chablis, or in Côte de Beaune, or in Côte de Nuit, or in Côte Chalonnaise. You can do it wherever you want. So that's a regional appellation, and it exists for example at Bourgogne Aligoté as well, which is the second varietal of white in Burgundy. Can also be done from all the sub-region we've mentioned.
So again, for the listeners, because Burgundy's complicated, and it's taken a long time for me to understand it. and I want to make sure people understand it, but the wines have such an amazing depth and character and complexity. In fact, in America, we have the Paulmeyer family, the famed Bordeaux-style wine here, but they also own a Pinot Noir farm in Sonoma, and they tried to buy land in Burgundy many years ago, and the state of France, shut them out. But his comment as a winemaker in America, and his fame is in America, is all wine enthusiasts end up in Burgundy, trying to figure Burgundy out. And so when we talk about Burgundy, we're talking about things like DRC, which I had a customer take 2 bottles of DRC 2014, not the Richebourg, but Romany Saint-Fauvent. I can't remember which appellation. Anyway, he took them to his cellar. He put them in there for one day, and his friends came over and offered him $16,000 for both bottles. Okay, and then that obviously has something to do with the rarity and the mystique of DRC. But then we have wines like the one you brought today, this Bourgogne Blanc, which is what you were talking about, which was fabulous wine, and it's like $20. I mean, one of the best I've tasted that's entry-level Burgundy.
Yeah. You must remember that in Burgundy, more than 50%, so half of the production, entire production, are regional appellation.
Yeah,
This means
really
that kind of wine, Bourgogne Blanc, Bourgogne Rouge, Bourgogne Aligoté, Crémant de Bourgogne are regional appellation. So that's the main part of it will be that kind of appellation. And then you've got, you mentioned, then you've got the village appellation. That's going to be around 35%.
Oh, I see, okay.
And then the Premier Cru level, which is around 10% of the production. And Grand Cru, you must keep in mind, it's only 2% less.
Oh, is it really?
2%.
Wow.
And this 2%, if you add the village, it's less than 15%.
That's amazing.
We are talking a lot of those because they are very famous, like you say.
Yes,
those are iconic wines. But in terms of volumes, that's the regional appellation, so the very good white you mentioned are the most important part of the production. So that's the complexity of Burgundy. And what we are claiming is the model of terroir, of climat.
Yes.
So we've got in total more than 80 appellation. So Meursault is an appellation, Pommard is an appellation, for example, Chablis is another one. And inside those appellations, you've got the climat, so the very specific plots that have been recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage. So this
really?
Organization of little pieces of land that one by one have got very specific character and will give specific character to the wine. So I don't know, Romanée Saint-Vivant, of course, is different than a Romanée which is just a few meters because of the change of soils, change of sun exposure that will make the Pinot or Chardonnay, when it's Chardonnay, expressing differently. So that's really the model of Burgundy that make it crazy to understand, but so passionate.
Yes.
You can spend a entire life to try to understand, compare, and see.
Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, I think one life is not enough.
It isn't enough because.
Yeah.
So here's that. I'm so glad you brought that up. Because I went to a Bichot event, Monsieur Chiamos, Christian, your friend. I know he's moved on, but he brought a bunch of rocks, Petit Caillou.
Yeah.
And was showing how the vines get to the soil and how different it is from one place to another, just across the street.
Yeah.
I mean, some vineyards are what? 2 hectares?
Yeah, or less than that. Yeah,
less than that.
Less than that. So it's a garden. It's a lot of garden next to each other. And
amazing.
You will find slight differences in terms of clay, in terms of percentages of stone, in terms of type of soil also themselves that will make the differences. And if you combine this with also the sun exposure, is it more a bit north? Is it in a comb? Where it's going to be a bit more cooler. What's the level of sunshine? And if you combine the changes of the soils with the changes of climatic condition, also combined with the winemaker,
yes, right.
You have an expression of all these different places, all these different climat. So we call them climat. and it's more than 1,000 in Burgundy.
More than 1,000. Wow.
That's why sometimes it's a bit frightening, and Burgundy is a bit frightening because it's so many complexity, but that's what make it really, really fascinating.
So here's the €1,000 question.
Oh, I got it.
How did the monks know? You know, the church had much to do with how the vineyards are established today. And my guess is that they had nothing but time to figure this out. But they didn't have any technology. They didn't know anything about this. They just knew what grapes, the quality of the grape that was being grown from one place to the other.
Yeah.
And they've established these regions.
Yeah. But what they had at this time is it's time. So if you look at the period that took out the work done by the monks, it took a while. So
It took a while.
yeah, it took really a while. So I won't say centuries, but a lot of time. So they had time to, in a way, to explore, compare, and to find out which was the best place. So even if they had no technology, no real knowledge of what was going on, they had time to taste and to plant in some places and see that was the right place. And so this is Clos Vougeot, this is Morgeau, this is all those kind of appellation. And yes, that's the only explanation to me. They took time to compare, assess, come back, review. So that's what we do today, but with more other techniques.
And they only got one chance a year, right? As we still do. You get one chance a year to do it, to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I had this conversation a lot, but to me it seems like, now that I have a Burgundian in the house, that was natural wine. It was not up until who knows when, the 30s or 40s, even the 50s. Was not that the definition of natural wine back in those days that we were making in Burgundy? It had to be, right? They weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
They were just picking and fermenting.
Yeah, picking, fermenting, also with a bit of loss. So sometimes it was going in kind of wine that was not drinkable.
Yeah.
So that
you
was
can't say that.
That was the risk.
Yeah.
So today we try to, of course, without being too technologic, to try to control also that to be sure we produce good wine every year. But they were doing a little bit like that, and sometimes you open very old bottles and you are amazed how it could be kept like that. Yeah.
What's the oldest vintage you've tasted?
Oh, not that old, 1945, something like that.
Well, no, but that's...
So that's not that old. But it's,
well, but for a Burgundy, that's pretty old.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, it was quite impressive. I can't remember the appellation, but quite impressive on the color, on the structure. So it's always amazing to see how the Pinot can also react to the time like this.
Was Burgundy affected by the war? Did the Germans or the...
Yeah, not that
not
much.
Like Bordeaux?
Not that much. So of course it has disturbed a little bit, more maybe on the Chablis section, but it has always run.
They had no idea what they were doing. They were just stealing paintings and stuff. They didn't understand. They could have really good wine.
Yeah,
while they were at it.
They knew they were at the right place. So
yeah.
A lot of bottles have been hidden at this time to prevent them from being drunk by.
Yeah. My father, we were at Tour d'Argent in Paris in 1993. We went to Vinexpo and we went to Tour d'Argent, and my father ordered the 45 Lafite.
Okay.
But it came up and it had that much dust, and the ullage was that much.
Okay.
And it was $3,000 at the time. This is 1993, and he asked the maitre d' what would happen if it's no good. He goes, that's too bad. You buy it.
It's yours now.
So he sent it back. We had a 62 Custis or no. So tell me, I was reading a book about Champagne, actually Madame Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot, and it was talking about this mini ice age that occurred in the late 1700s in Champagne, which is very close to Burgundy, and lasting like 15 years. And I know that Burgundy is being affected greatly, if not one of the largest effect in the wine world, with climate change. Mm-hmm. What is Bichot doing, and is it really affecting it today, or are we still sort of planning for more?
Well, the first things to me is at a human scale we see it. So even me, I'm quite a young winemaker, so I see it on if you compare the date of harvest, if you compare also the level of maturity we are reaching, the dates, since 30, 40 years has been big changes. And when you speak with older people, they were always harvesting in October, for example.
Wow,
and we do that most of the time now, even in August. So there is for sure something happening. It is changing, and we see it on the recent vintages like 18, 19, 20. We've seen bolder wines. We'll see extraction of color. So we cannot say there is nothing happening.
Right.
So now the question is how do we cope with that? How do we also keep our minds and our souls to avoiding having so over extracted burgundies or lack of acidity in our wines. So that's many things we do slowly. That's the evolution that we call evolution. So slowly, step by step, we are changing a few things. It could be individually, like we do in our vineyards by selection of the material we're gonna plant. So we can choose things that used to be discarded because ripening too late, and we are using them now because they are back in the landscape because they manage us to help us to keep the acidity. In terms of canopy management also, we can do some things. So a few things in the way also we work the soils to avoid having evaporation and lose too much water. So small thing we can do at our scale. But besides that, there are more larger studies that are done by also BIVB, so that oversees everything in Burgundy, where we launched some studies on what's going to be the future, how we can adapt the way we conduct and we are planting, also things on the place we can plant. Can we use higher altitude places? In most of the appellation, you cannot use the northern part, so that's another option to use the cooler. So it's a combination of different things that are now on the study to make sure that the global warming won't affect us. And also there's going to be for sure an evolution of the wines, but we must not lose our model, which is the climate, and show what each territory has to show, and in order to keep that.
Well, that is one of the things. Like, I don't. This is not political show, so it's not the source of the changing climate. Is not my problem in the sense of this conversation. But it also has opened up regions of the world, if not just Burgundy alone. Like you just said, at different elevations, we can start growing grapes or better grapes. Places like England have now a thriving industry. And so, and in this book, Veuve Clicquot was, 15 years, 16, 18 years, they were dealing with this cooling. And so I'm wondering if this is not just a cyclical thing, or if we actually are in this serious problem of growing.
Yeah, difficult to say. The thing that for sure we are in a cycle that goes up. So who knows if it will go down?
Right.
All the predictions that are made by scientists show that it's there is an oscillation, but it's going up.
So generally, it's going up.
Generally, it's going up. So we have to, of course, to take this into account. We are farming organic for now more than 20 years. So that's also a way for us to take this into account and to make something in this direction. But all the work is in front of us to be sure that we won't have black or very extracted Pinot Noir in the future years, and that you won't see any terroir anymore. So it's really in the forefront.
That would be tragic to lose the terroir.
That's
in Burgundy.
What makes the region so specific and makes the wine so individual. So that's really the key thing about Burgundy. So we have to work on this.
Is there a consortium? Is there a group of winemakers that you meet together to discuss each other's headwinds, the problems, issues, things that
Yes.
You share knowledge.
We've got a group of technical teams or technical winemakers, technical directors, and others that we meet once a month, and we've got several subjects we deal together. And the idea is not have answers by ourselves alone. So if you try to find alone the answer, you will never find. So this is something, we try to think together, and also knock at the good doors in terms of scientists, in terms of people that could help us to understand what's going on, and give them also some money to make some studies to help us on this. So there is an organization around this, to be sure we work together and that we have also the same idea, what we want to focus on and what's the target.
I was reading a book that's just titled Burgundy. That's the name of it. And it's an old book. It's from the 60s. Mm. And so it's kind of interesting because the most current information that author had was 1969 or something. And so he goes back further than maybe a book that'll be written today to go talk about it. What was not Burgundy much of the production négociant in the, let's say, 40s, 50s, and 60s?
Yes. There is a big turn when the producer started bottling. So that wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case.
So it's incredible to think about it. So most of the wine were going through the négociants or bulk wine, and bottling at the estate is something quite new in the history of Burgundy.
Really, it's great. It's 70s maybe, 60s and 70s?
Maybe a bit earlier than that.
Really?
Yeah. So it's crazy to think now the situation of Burgundy and see how it was before. So the négociant was a king, so right. he was sending his people to buy and purchase the different bulk wine, and everything was going mainly through the négoce. So now that's something totally different.
It's like, why? There's probably no answer to this, but why did it do that? Why did that happen that way?
I mean, the demand was different. There was no this appetite on cru and understanding the terroir that has developed lately. There was also mass people, working in the factories to feed with wine. So that was something more as a daily drink. And then later on, they've discovered the golden aspect of that. It's the terroir are fabulous. They have something to say. They have to be preserved in 2 bottles, and this has changed the whole.
Well, I'd like to think it's a daily drink right now.
Oh, it's a kind of
right.
It remains a daily drink, but with all the countries.
Because the négociant, the argument for négociants, for the listeners, that's somebody that doesn't own the vineyards, doesn't pick the grapes, doesn't crush the wine, but they go out and source the best juice they can find to bottle under their brands. And it was primarily the English throughout the world of wine actually did this. They did it in Bordeaux as well, in other parts of the world. But here, where it's such a fascinating, small vineyard part of the world is so specific to the quality of the terroir, it just seems amazing to me that's how it started. So when Bernard Bichot founded Bichot in 1831, that was probably ahead of his time a little bit. He was in Montélimar, which I've had many wines from there, which are great. But what was he doing? What was he thinking? Do you know? Does anybody know?
Yeah, he was owner of vineyards a little bit, but he wanted to. I think he had more customers than what he could produce himself. So that's how things are generally beginning, and so he decided to expand his production by being a négociant at the time. This means buying bulk wine, doing some blends, and then be able to supply more people. And then so the company has grown. They've purchased land again, so that's why today we have more than 100 hectares in total. But this came quite lately, so at the beginning there wasn't a lot of land, or at this period the land was more a burden, difficult to farm. And we've heard many stories where at the end of the 19th century, a lot of négociants have sold their vineyard because nobody wanted to take care of them. So now that's totally the opposite, and everybody is running after the land.
Wow.
And so the stories have changed a lot. The thing is, today, if you look at what's going on in Bourgogne, everybody is now producer and négociant. And it has been a recent changes, so since the last 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
I mean, the very small wine grower, producer, estate settle are most of the time increasing their production by purchasing some grapes or must. So they become a little bit negociant.
Yes.
And the negociant, like us, historically negociant, will purchase some land and become some also landowner and producer. So the two worlds are tending to merge now, and we are all a little bit producer and negociant. What has also changed a lot is the way we do the negociant part of the job. We used to buy a lot of bulk wine, so finished wine that we used to take into the properties really at the end of the vinification. Right now, we do a lot of, and for us, we do a lot of vinification. This means we don't buy some bulk wine anymore. We're going to purchase some fruit. So during the harvest, we're going to purchase some fruit or pressed juice, just
the pressed juice too.
After the harvest, and we're going to vinify ourselves. So that's a way to have an even quality between what we produce on our estates and what we can do with purchased fruit. The winemaker will be the same, and so we've got an even regularity in quality.
So you have 100 hectares, or about 250 acres, under your control.
Yeah. So
and how many hectares total of that you negotiate as well?
Yeah, so besides the estate part, we purchase around 450 acres of vineyards.
Wow.
So in many appellations. So it could be on the regional level, like Aligoté or Bourgogne Blanc, but also on other appellations that are on the higher end. And so it's really a new way of doing the work of negociant.
Yeah.
You have control on the production, you have control on the winemaking, on the style, how style you want to give to your winemaking. And that's making the work much more interesting, because you have the grape at the beginning and you do what you want with. So that's much more.
Yeah, so as a negociant, you can buy grapes, which you probably have some control with the farmer to decide what those are going to be like. Mm. But you could buy the pressed juice, the first pressing, take the juice fresh and ferment it at your location.
Exactly.
So, or you can buy the wine already fermented and elevate it or do whatever you want to. Yeah. So how does this always a question in my mind, because I know Louis Jadot, Frederic Barnier is a friend, and they have 100 wines, 75 different wines. How does, as a technical director with Bichot, how do you bring in all these different little, potentially very small plots of land, the grapes from small plots of land, and make sure that you're delivering in the bottle what represents that? How do you keep that straight?
Yeah, what we have is a specific organization to us. In the wineries, we don't have one single place where we do everything, and that's maybe something that makes us different from other negociant house, is that we've got 4 or 5 different wineries inside the vineyards. For example, Domaine du Clos Frontin, which is located in Côte de Nuit, will take care of all the vineyards we own in Côte de Nuit, but also from the grapes that are coming from Côte de Nuit. This means that the winemaker here, I would say, specialized in taking care of this section, this subsection of Burgundy. And that's the same in Pommard. In Pommard, we have Domaine du Pavillon, and another winemaker again will take care of Pommard and all the appellations that are coming from this area. Chablis, that's the same. In Chablis, you don't vinify a Chablis like you vinify a Meursault or a Chassagne. Right. It's totally different. So we've got a specific team up there that's going to take care of the Chablis area.
So they become little experts in there.
Yeah, and of course there's a head winemaker and part of it to be sure that the house style is respected. But then we've got experts on every coast that are dedicated to the coast. And this makes us quite specific. Of course, it's much more transfer, it's much more in terms of logistics, it's much more complicated, but we think it's more accurate. We need to extract the best of every sub-region of Burgundy.
And that has to be, from a business standpoint, that has to be expensive. And you have to decide that we're going to make sure we maintain the integrity of what we're trying to do in lieu of a little more profit to make sure it gets to the public.
Yeah, especially when you decide to vinify yourself. It's easy to say, just a few words.
Yeah, right.
But behind it's a lot of tanks. It's lots of
So the organic practices, all organic, all indigenous yeasts, or do you inoculate?
Yeah. It's most of them are indigenous yeast,
Wow.
And after, depending on some years, you need to speed up a little bit the things to be sure that there is nothing that will be there before you ferment yourself. But it's it's a specific organization, of course, organic. In the cellar needs also some.
I'm assuming that's part of the
recording
requirement.
Yeah.
But doesn't it seem normal or natural in the world of anything? My daughter's a boulanger. She was trained in Isanjo.
Okay.
And that's fermentation sciences, right?
Yeah.
Sourdough.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem natural, though, that if you're going to pick a grape from the Côte de Nuit or from Pomar or wherever, that indigenous yeast is meant to be there and it's meant to ferment those grapes, and it produces what's going to be the most indicative of what's supposed to come from there?
Yeah,
I mean, it just makes sense to me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's why we also, this organization with different cellars makes more locally. Of course, the indigenous yeast will be not mixed in a big cellar, and that's why also we use that kind of organization. But yes, that's part of the identity of terroir, and of course. Yeah.
So after Bernard Bichot founded in 1831, his son Albert Bichot, the namesake of the vineyard, started working there in the late 19th century. I'm reading from one of your things. But who's running the show now? Alberic Bichot, sixth generation. Is that a long time in Burgundy, or is that sort of like middle of the road?
I think that's quite a long time.
Pretty up there.
Yeah.
I mean, in America, that doesn't exist at all. So.
Yeah. That's quite a long time, and the thing is, the family is still owner 100% of the company, so it's still a family-owned company, 100%.
Wow.
Which is something quite rare now.
It's very rare.
So I think being run by a family makes the things sometimes a bit slower, because the decision has been to be discussed around a glass of wine, of course. And,
yeah, of course.
And it takes a bit more time, but it also give you some stability and be sure that you will be there in the distance. So all the decisions are there is a lot of reflection around the big decisions to be sure that they are really good made in order to preserve the family. So I think that's a good example of a family run in the long distance, and I hope for a long time again.
It's kind of interesting. We went to Tennessee this last weekend. And we went to the Jack Daniels, the bourbon house. And we got this wonderful tour. And the guy's talking about Jack Daniels and how he founded it and how the whole story, Prohibition. But then at the end he says, we're owned by Brown-Forman, which is like one of the largest distilled spirit distributors in the world, if not the world, along with all kinds of wine. And it kind of took the air out of the story. Like, we're talking about this guy, Jack Daniel, and we're talking about this person who founded the place and his whole history, and then now it's just by this big conglomerate.
Yeah.
And I love hearing this story here, that Bichot is still part of the family. Are there people behind Alberic?
Yeah, Alberic's got 3 kids.
Oh, boy.
A boy, he's got a boy, so
yeah.
he's I think he's 15 years old right now, so probably he'll be the next one, or maybe he's...
Is he working there? I mean, is he in the
No,
cellar?
he's still young, so still studying.
No, we got to get him to work.
And
what are you talking about?
His younger daughter, so she's called Adélie, so the name of one of our estates. So Adélie is the youngest. I think she's always there during harvest, having a look, giving the hand. So maybe she will be the next generation. Who knows?
Who knows?
But we hope so. That's a so beautiful story.
I worked in my dad's wine shop when I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
I wasn't a very good employee, but I showed up.
Yeah, but this gave you a background.
Sometimes.
And yeah, of course.
Sometimes.
So we'll see in the future. We hope.
Do you think you're with the winemaker? How many winemakers do you have there?
A total of 5 winemakers. So if you combine Chablis and the rest of Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit, it's a total of 5 winemakers.
Are they all Burgundians, or they come from other parts of the world?
Some are Burgundian, some are coming from other parts.
Yeah.
So, but that's the interesting part of it. You can also combine something you've seen in other places, and also open your mind a little bit.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
A lot of winemakers I interview have, went to the South America, the Southern Hemisphere, to work the opposite harvest and make wines. And I think there's a value to that rounding of what you see and how you react. Because I think you'd agree that the terroir of not only these wonderful Burgundies also includes the experience of the winemaker, in your experience.
And that's the case. For me personally, I went to South Africa 2 times, to Lebanon as well, Bordeaux also. We've got some other winemakers that recently joined us. They've also been in the States for winemaking. So now you have to open your mind like this and take also some interesting point of view from overseas.
That was the intriguing thing, and I don't see it here in my notes, but you made wine in Chateau Mouzar, or one of the Lebanese. I need to talk about this for a second, because I'm Armenian, right? And and they found this winery in Armenia, the cave, 6,000 years old. You know, there's shoes, there's amphora inside this winery, and so wine's been around forever. But you know, nobody knows what they are. But there are quite a few Lebanese wines here.
Yeah.
And what were you doing there?
Well, so I went there just after my study for one campaign of winemaking. So it was a very brand new winery called Tanail Property. So I think it's still there. They were also doing Arak and
oh, were they?
and olive oil. So it was very interesting. And they started a new winery there. So the idea was to also teach the people. Everything was a bit on a rush because the harvests were quite early, so we had to make everything ready, teach the people, find the right workers. So it was a great experience. Also buy the grapes. So I was going with the chief winemaker to buy the grapes in the valleys and everything. So it's a great experience of starting a new project. And be sure also that the people would work safely in the cellar. That was, CO2 and everything. That was quite complicated.
Can they make world-class wine there?
I think so.
Does it take time?
Yeah, I think so. The thing is that they had to work with the vineyard that were there. So that was maybe the problem. So if you wanted to expand the vineyard and the quality, you had to replant and make sure you have good varietals to do that. So I think that's the case now. At this time there were only 6 estates in Lebanon. It has really expanded.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
So a lot more. So I think for sure the quality is there.
But it was Rhone varietals, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff, huh?
I mean, you can do a rosé or thing like that. No, they've switched to much more quality things.
The only Lebanese wine I've ever done here was a rosé, actually.
Yeah. So now in reds they can do good things as well, but they had to replant to be sure to have good grapes at the beginning. That's the beginning of the things.
Okay, so and I told you I was Armenian. I visited Armenia in 2006. All of it was undrinkable. No technology, total indigenous. Who cares? Okay. And that's changed a lot, as you probably know. There's a lot coming to America. There's some technologies, but still nothing that there's some quality manufacturing happening, but nothing extraordinary until yesterday. Somebody brought me a wine. It's the first time that I sensed in the grape Arani, it's called Arani Noir, the terroir. It's the first time of all the wines I've tasted from Armenia. It's the first one I go, okay, now I'm starting to get this. And it takes a long time for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's how when I hear, I think Michel Roland told a friend of mine that it's going to take 100 years for to figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And this is what's so fascinating about Burgundy. We started the conversation with, they've been doing it since the 1200s, even before 900 and 600. Mm-hmm. They've had a lot of time to figure it out.
You of course, you need to, like we said at the beginning, you have to understand, to assess, to also to make errors and make mistakes and learn from them to go on and change. So, but the approach of terroir, I think, is something was in a few decades ago, Burgundy was making. People were joking about Burgundy because it was so complicated and terroir and blah blah blah, and now we see viticulture of terroir in many places, including in the US. So it's to me one of the key things if you want to make good wines and to also to have distinct wine from other places.
I think it's our job to tell the people that this exists. We're going to run out of time here in a minute, but I wanted to ask you one question, and we're going to get to our medical question. But a lot of wineries, particularly Burgundians, have moved or have put up house in Willamette Valley, Oregon. Is Bichot there, and they have plans to be there?
No, not really. Well, Bichot, that's again a family decision. They decided to focus on Burgundy.
Yeah.
And they stay on this. So maybe this includes, of course, Beaujolais, which is, I would say, maybe a sub-region of Burgundy. But we focus, and we've got some projects in Burgundy. It takes time because everything takes money.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, the main focus remains Burgundy because we think, if you look at the map, there are some places we are not. I mentioned Pouilly-Fuissé, for example. We like those beautiful wines from the Mâconnais. And so maybe in the future we could do something here. So now the target remains Burgundy in general, so from Chablis to Mâcon.
It's interesting because we were there in 1989. It was the second of the Pinot Noir festivals held in Oregon, and they invited all the French Burgundians. And it was I don't think even Drouin was there yet, or maybe they just started. And the interesting thing about Pinot Noir in California is because it's so expressive of where it's grown, even between Napa Valley, Sonoma, the Central Coast, Santa Ynez, Monterey, they're all so dramatically different, which was they should be, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that I remember about that, and I was younger, was that everybody's talking about how Burgundian the Willamette Valley wines were. And you don't hear that anymore because I think people have realized we're not trying to be Burgundy or trying to be Burgundy's Burgundy.
Yeah.
You can't replicate Burgundy. And you shouldn't be chasing the profile. You should be chasing your own profile.
Yeah, try to be yourself. And
that's the motto. Be what it is.
Yeah.
Well, we're already at 46 minutes, and I promised you 45, but I have to ask you this question. I told you that when you walked in that we have his book. It's Dr. Maury. He's a medical doctor from France. He wrote this book in 1974. He's also a homeopathic doctor, so he did both. And so on the back is a little cheat sheet of what you can drink to cure yourself of particular human ailments. You ready for this?
Dr. Paul K. I'm listening to you.
So, all right, I'm going to pick an ailment here. I'm going to pick diarrhea. Okay, not to be crass
that's
or
a
gross,
good subject.
but it's an interesting one. So you can have a Grave, a young Beaujolais, or Champagne to cure your problem. I won't say it again. What do you think, though? Which one of those?
I think my knowledge in medical things. Maybe I will say Champagne. So I hope the people from Champagne won't listen to us. But I think Champagne is, the bubble. I think it might clean everything inside.
Maybe it cleans you out, right?
And the acidity makes everything back to normal.
In this particular case, I'm sorry to say that you're wrong because that would be for rheumatism.
Oh, sorry.
But and I kind of set you up because it's Beaujolais, young Beaujolais.
Okay.
So now you know.
Yeah, I'll try that the next time.
Now, but the question is the dosage.
What's the dosage?
What the good doctor recommends.
I think should be around one bottle per.
Well, that's about right. 4 glasses, but that could easily be a bottle, right? So, and I think what's funny is I've read this through, and sometimes the cure has nothing to do with the ailment. In other words, you just feel better after you drink the wine anyway. So what difference does it make?
So at the end, just drink wine and you'll be better.
And you'll be better anyway. So it's been such a pleasure, Matthew, having you here.
Thank you
so
very
glad.
much.
I hope your travels are safe as you head back to France later this week. And look forward to seeing you again when we're down there.
Yeah, hope to see you in Burgundy soon.
Yes, we're coming. I want a job there. Can you get me a job?
Yeah, I can find easily. Let's talk about that.
I'm trying to convince my wife to let me spend 90 days in the chateau.
Well, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.